Yo, so what's going on, guys? My name is Dustin, and I'm here to tell you guys a little bit more about me. Now, this is a series where I go through some of the events throughout my life, put them down in video form, and you guys fabsturbate to them. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the last one. It got a little serious, a little in-depth. You found out a little bit more about my father. If you guys have not checked it out, there is a playlist together. Go down to the description down below. If you missed any other episodes, this is episode 5. Try to keep them in order if you can. But here we go. Without further ado, we're going to talk a little bit about my mom, my grandmother Angel, and other little knickknacks. Now, during this period, we're going to skip up a few years. We're about roughly 10 years old. We're going to be getting into middle school here soon. And we're going to talk a little bit about my mom and grandma. At this current time, I really didn't spend too much time over at my other grandma's. When I was younger, she had that stroke, and that stroke rendered her paralyzed. I don't remember the sound of her voice or anything like that, you know what I mean? So when that happened, the family kind of fell apart. I never really saw my cousins again. The only person on my dad's side of the family that I ever saw after that point was him. And I miss my grandpa, and I remember observing my grandpa. He was never a mean guy, but he was never a nice guy. You know what I mean? He was just one of those grandpas that stood at the front door looking out the screen door the whole day. And that's kind of all he did. He liked to punish us, though. He'd give us the switches or paddle us or something like that. But I got mad respect for him because he did something that a man should do if ever presented the unfortunate circumstances that he was given. The woman that he loved, he married and raised like 7 kids with, ended up having a stroke, rendered paralyzed, and he had to spend the rest of his life taking care of her. My grandmother was a little overweight. Okay, I can't say a little. She was overweight. She was pretty heavy. And it didn't help with the paralysis and everything like that. So throughout his period, you know, I'd sit there and watch him. I'd talk, and, you know, they'd watch, you know, some of the church shows together, some of the religion. You know, he'd take care of her. He'd feed her. He'd, you know, she could move her head a little bit, but that's about all she could do. She could move her head, and she could make noises and try to speak. And, you know, they did things together, and, you know, him having to put her in the lift and transport her from bed to her chair and so on and so forth. And it takes a man to do that, man. And there aren't many strong men. I mean, it takes a strong man to raise a family, and it takes an entirely different kind of person to stay behind and take care of somebody that you care about so much like that. And I think we need more people like that in the world. That's definitely respect right there in simplest form. But anyways, we'll talk a little bit about my grandmother Jean, my grandma Angel. Now, Grandma Angel was a badass. I don't know how to put this to you, but she grew up taking care of her brother, who had stuttering issues, is really scrawny. And she was the badass on the street. She grew up in a primarily black neighborhood. And this was back in the day, too, so things didn't go too well for, you know, so white people in a pretty much all-black neighborhood. So a lot of things happened to them throughout the period. I remember her telling me, I think it was her telling me a story about how she had to actually, you know, knife some girl in the street for bullying her brother or something like that. And I'm like, damn, Grandma, just straight shanking bitches, prison rules, everything works. And she's always been a family person, and she, again, just like my mother, pretty much raised my uncle and my mom on her own. And until she met Glenn, who was my grandpa Glenn, he was the guy that, you know, we'd eat the Happy Meals with me. He ended up dying from overdose. And then from there on out, she was alone. And during this period, I was, 6, 7, 8, 9, something like that. And she changed a little bit. And it wasn't until I was getting into middle school and she started getting more involved in my life that she opened up, started enjoying time with me. And she became my best friend. To this day, she's the person, with the exception of my wife now, that she is the person that I've always trusted, respected, looked up to, and idolized for the ways she lived her life and the kind of person she was. She was that strong mother, just like my mom, that raised her kids alone. Man kind of walked out on her. She did what she needed to do. She worked for the Senate. She helped train Kasich, or what's his name, John Kasich, something like that. And she did lots of good things in her life. She was a really hard-working woman. We'd go to Lowe's or Home Depot or something like that, and they'd know her by her first name. This woman, dude, she was Diesel. She was very, very, very well built, very healthy. She liked to repair things. She could do drywall, and she could do all these things. She taught me a lot of those things as well. But I remember her because she was always there for me when I needed her. I had the issues with my dad, the depression, and I brought that home. And to this day, I've always felt bad because I took a lot of that out on my mom. And as a kid, I didn't understand what she did for me. So, Mom, if you're watching, I want to let you know I love you. I'm grateful for everything you've done. And I know I didn't turn out the best, but I know we made do with what we had, and I'm grateful for what we had, and I appreciate everything you tried to do for me. And I know you wanted so much more for me, but we did what we needed to do, and I think I turned out okay. We had a few laughs, a few arguments, a couple broken walls from both me and her. Yes, you guys know where I get it from now. And I gotta let you guys understand that a lot of this is going to be coming from feelings from what I felt as a child. So if any of you guys think I'm talking badly about my mom, this is just how I was, I guess, imaging her way back then, So during this period, my grandmother was kind of like the mediator. Me and my mom would do nothing but clash and butt heads. I was intentionally an asshole to her all the time. And I really don't know why. We never linked. I never trusted her. And she'd come home from work all day just trying to make ends meet, and I'd make her night horrible. She'd have to hassle me to clean, to do this and that. And I didn't understand or appreciate or want to do any of that stuff, and I made her life hell. And how she held on that long is amazing to me. I used to blame her. I used to always feel she gave up on me. And I guess to an extent she did. At least that's how I felt. So I don't think she ever gave up on me, but I felt like she did. I felt like from a young age that she didn't like me. And it started off early. Back when I was a kid and I was diagnosed with ADHD, my mom forced me to be on this medication, and I didn't want to do it. I felt like it changed me. It made me feel like that she wanted me to become better, and she'd have to medicate me to be what she wanted me to be. And I felt like, why is the normal me not okay? Why am I flawed? And I always had this feeling as a younger kid when she'd do that, and whenever we'd be around people, she'd always talk, oh yeah, he's on his medication now, he behaves so much more better. And I'm like, I didn't feel like me. I felt like I was contained and bottled up, and it did mature me. I didn't eat as much. I was able to focus and zone in instead of my mind being in all different places at once. So even though that was true, I always felt that my mom liked me, but only when I was on the medication, and that kind of hurt my feelings as a kid. And we clashed a lot, especially during the middle school and high school years. We didn't like each other, not one fucking bit. We butted heads. We were never really friends. There were periods through my life where I'd talk to her one time a night, like, "Hey, how was your day?" And she'd say, "Fine." And I'd say, "What's for dinner?" And she'd say, "What's for dinner?" And that's all we spoke all night. And this went on for years. That's kind of how we were. And I blamed her for so much, wrongfully. Could she have been a better mother? Yeah, but you could say that about anyone. I love her for everything she did. And I made it difficult on her, intentionally. I was a bad kid. And I don't know why. I guess I just didn't know how to channel it. She got me into, therapy and counseling with people through school and stuff like this. And I always felt that she wanted to fix me rather than it was actually her wanting to help. You know what I mean? She was just wanting to help me, but I felt like she didn't like me, and all she was trying to do is make me more like she wanted me to be and craft me into something that I'm not. And I always felt that she didn't like me. And that's never a cool feeling, to feel like your mom didn't like you. And I just didn't understand it back then. Now that I'm old enough, I understand that she tried her best. She did great. I wish I could be half the parent that she was. And I know she might not have been able to give me a mansion or shiny cars and everything like this, but that doesn't matter. She put a roof over my head. She fed me every night. And I guess that's all that's required of a parent. I mean, and though things sound a little rough for me, there are kids out there that eat out of garbage cans. There are kids out there that have no parents or in the middle of war and conflict and will never know what an actual outfit or shoes are like. And so I'm not trying to feel bad for myself or want you guys to feel bad for me at all. I'm just trying to, put this out there for you guys. But I made things extremely difficult for her. And during the middle school years, this was the years where things started getting complicated. She was single for most of this period. She did marry a guy. His name was Glenn. Now, not Glenn, but Greg. I'm sorry, Glenn was my grandpa. Greg. Greg was a drug addict. He was something else. We lost him. I mean, if I had a nickel for every time, I think they were together for 4 out of the 6 years they were married. He was the closest thing that I had to a father. If anybody were to ever ask me, "Hey, how's your father?" The first person I think of is Greg. And I remember all that stuff. I remember having to go see him. I remember going to the meetings for his rehab. And that's an experience for a child, having to see these guys confess their problems, getting their little coins and medals for 6 months sober, and being there supporting. We got involved, even though I wasn't religious, as a child. I just was bored as fuck. I hated being there for, listening to them talk about God. And I'm like, dude, can I go home and play Pokemon? I didn't like that stuff, but I understood it was something to help him, and he attached himself to God and tried to become stronger. And, Mom just eventually gave up. I think the second or third time he went to prison, she had to call it quits, and she had to separate from the person she loved. And he was really the guy that I wanted in my life. He was a good father while he was there. He took care of me. I remember jumping on his belly. He had a hairy fucking belly, but I was a kid, you know what I mean? We'd wrestle, and, he'd lay on the ground and let me jump on him, and, it was just fun. I mean, we had good times, and that's what I wanted for my father, and I never got it. And he was a really good guy, even throughout all the drugs. I mean, there are a lot of people that have addictions and problems in their life, and I learned this at a young age. And it doesn't mean they're bad people. They just made bad decisions. They have the fangs and the addiction are in them so hard. So I learned about alcohol. I learned about drunks. I learned about drugs. I learned about people overdosing. I learned about what happened to the family. He lost his mother and his brother while he was in prison. Can you imagine an addiction putting you in prison, feeling so weak, so vulnerable, so out of control, and then you lose your mother and everything in there, and you just blame yourself even more? I feel bad for the man. He's not how he is now. He's like a ghost now. I see him, and he can't even look at me. But, that was the closest guy I ever had to a father in my life, and he was only around for a couple years. So Mom was single throughout the most of the time through my middle school years. Spent a lot of time playing video games. This is kind of what started it. I started up playing PlayStation, Crash Bandicoot, balls deep in some Crash Bandicoot. The Witch Doctor just... Oh, you know what the fuck it is, right? Come on. So Crash Bandicoot was a good phase. Resident Evil, Doom. I'll also be posting those on my Let's Play channel soon too. Walkthroughs of those. They really impacted my life as a kid. Those kind of things. Bond with the AI and everything like that. Incredible games, and that's kind of what I dove into. That's how I dealt with my problems. I didn't have any other form of outlet. I used to draw. I used to be entertained. I used to, draw that kind of stuff. Dragon Ball Z characters, so on and so forth. I used to do that kind of stuff in school. But my real passion, my real escape, the thing that made everything okay was video games. And it was a crutch. And I will repeat right now, and I'll tell you guys, it's never healthy to have one thing to only rely on. I put myself entirely in video games. Every time I put the controller down, I'm like, fuck, we're back in the real world. I hate my life. And I was really depressed during this period. I didn't understand things. I didn't respect my mom. Actually, I did the opposite. I disrespected her any chance I could. I tried my hardest to piss her off, and the fact that she stayed calm through most of this. I mean, she used to get mad and break things, DVD players, throw pots at me. She used to get fucking mad. But I brought it on myself. And I used to blame her, and I took all the anger issues out on my mom. She was the only person there, and I feel so guilty for that. I felt so bad for it. And it's not good to feel. I mean, all that guilt has been there. And then I used to blame her. I used to think that she gave up on me and hated me and everything like that, when in fact all she really did was care, maybe a little too much. But we were always distant. We were never close. We never bonded. Some parents are just like that. I mean, some get along great with their father, not their mother, vice versa. And during this period, my mom... met this guy. This guy, his name's Terry. And him coming into my mom's life was probably the second worst thing of my life, second worst experience of my life. And I'll tell you a little bit about him. Terry was a former professional sniper. He killed people for a living. It's what he used to do. He served, he did Desert Storm, so on and so forth. So he had his fair share of, the war and everything like that. And this guy was Satan in human skin. I despise this man more than anything now. I hated my stepmom. I hated my dad. But I wanted this guy dead. Like, I wanted him to, not be alive any longer. And that kind of hatred towards somebody is not healthy. He came into my mom's life. They were together for a couple years. And during this couple years was the hardest part of my life. This is where everything between my mother and I broke. This is where I just was done with her. I couldn't stand her. And he came in and he had issues. Let me tell you a little bit about him. He served in there. He ended up meeting this woman back in Germany where he was stationed. They had a couple kids. He got her knocked up. She was having a third kid. Her thing was set up. She came home. She deployed out. He was still there for another 6 months. She came back. She moved to a state where basically he will have no jurisdiction, no say in any sort of matter. Came back home. He has 3 daughters, and the woman that raised the kids that he had relations with went lesbian and went to a state where he'd not be able to do anything about it. And she had sole custody of these kids, and he was never able to see his kids again. And I can understand how that'll take a toll on a guy. And I think that frustration from that, the fact that he couldn't see his kids, so he's not going to treat anyone else's kids special, kind of is what happened to me. I was disrespectful to my mom. He didn't like this. He was the kind of guy that you make your bed, you tighten up those sheets, you got to make a penny bounce off that bitch. That's the kind of guy he was. When I was around him, I felt like I was a slave. He'd make me do this and that. I got grounded for stupid shit. You open up the refrigerator and don't pull anything out, and you kick that generator on, grounded. You go in a room, you turn the light on, you leave the room without turning the light off, you're wasting money, grounded. You move the table, grounded. You exhale, grounded. So I was in a lot of trouble, and I had to rebel against this guy. So I was pretty much grounded throughout most of the period what was going on. And this is where a lot of things changed. This is where I actually started to hate my mom. There's no way to say this, but I always felt that she sided with him. I never understood why she stayed with this guy. And I would not understand until years later. But he made my life miserable. He really did. He made me cut the grass 2 or 3 times over. He did all these things. He'd invite his parents over and make me serve them dinner and take care of the television and clean up, and didn't like him. I didn't like him. And, he'd set up surveillance in the house, and this is probably the biggest thing ever. This is where I hit my cracking point, where I would have probably murdered this guy. One day he set up surveillance in the house. He set up cameras to find out what I did when I came home, because he questioned me the day before, because we had a table. It was kind of like I guess a fourth of a circle. It was just one of those shapes, kind of like a triangle but round on one side. And had wheels on it, and he asked, hey, why was the table moved? And this was slightly off, a couple inches. It was barely pushed. And he said, did you move that? And I said, no. And that's kind of where it died. You know what I mean? I didn't think anything more of it. Next day, he's got surveillance up. He comes home right after I've been home from school. I just opened up some new packs of Pokemon cards, and what I used to do is just not thinking, just carelessly getting excited. What I used to do is I'd sit on the couch, and then I'd do this little leech worm slouch, and I'd fall in between the couch and the table and sit on the floor, which budged and slightly pushed the table forward. He did all that stuff, and I was talking to my friend, pacing through the hallway, saying, oh, hey, I got new holographic this and that. And then he came home. He went into his room, which had a lock on the door. He had all his weapons and stuff in there, and he pretty much, that was his little cave. He'd hide in there, and he'd spend lots of his time in there. And basically, I'd go in there, and he got home, he came back out, and he questioned me. He said, no, whatever you do, make sure you don't lie to me. And I'm like, all right. So when you said you came home and you sat down and you didn't move that table again, you didn't do that, right? And I'm like, no. He said, that's your first lie. Don't let there be another. And he said, so that all you did, you accidentally moved the table. And I said, yeah. He's like, that's the second lie. You made a phone call. And I'm like, are you serious? Don't let there be another. And during this is when my mom got home. She was sitting on the couch. And at this point, I'm like crying because I'm being interrogated and forced all these questions, and I don't know what I'm doing wrong. I was on the phone. I wasn't paying any attention. I slipped down in between the section in between the couch and the table, and I was on the phone. I didn't know that I nudged it. I accidentally did it, unconsciously aware that I moved the table. And he grilled me for it. He tried so hard to paint me out to be the bad guy, and the worst part through all of this, the thing that broke my heart, broke my spirits, broke me down, to the point that I was depressed, and even I didn't want to live any longer. I wasn't suicidal, but I gave up. If there's a level before that, that's where I was during this period. I just did not want to live any longer. And this was a rough period because my mom always sided with him, and I never understood why. I felt like she chose him over me. I never knew if it was fear. I never knew if he hit her or threatened her, or if she honestly believed all the bullshit he told her. And I felt, after being betrayed by my father and my stepmother over this, now there's a new guy in my mom's life, the person I care about most, the person that raised me, and I felt like she was siding with him, and I felt like I was betrayed yet again by not, my other parent. And it was hard, and I didn't know until years later that she was just protecting me. This guy, threatened her. He threatened to kill himself, and that's why she kept him around. She didn't want his suicide or, him to get crazy and kill all of us. She didn't want that to happen. And she did what she thought was smart. She made the best interest. She made a judgment call, and she stayed with him. In a horrible relationship, let him stay in the house, let him abuse me, be mean to me, make me do all this shit, mistreat me. And she let this continue. And it was crazy, man. This guy was fucked up, man. He made Hitler look like a fucking fairy, dude. It was painful. I was not allowed to sing in the car. If there was a nice fucking song on, you couldn't hum or sing. He'd yell at me. It was just like, I wish I could paint this picture. I wish. There's no way that I could show you how bad and how much of a fucktard this guy was. But I'd never wish you guys to experience what I dealt with this guy. I wanted to actually kill him. And that makes me feel weak. That makes me feel wrong to be that low, to want to end another person's life. And it made things hard on me, and it separated my mom. This was the final sever, the final tear in the relationship between me and Mom. During this period and the period from there on out, there was no communication. There was no talking. There was no smiles. If we ever confronted each other, we did it bullheaded, and we argued, and just that's what happened. And the only person that was ever there to save us was Grandma Angel. She was our angel. She was the one that took care of us. She sided with both of us. She took care of me. Hey, Grandma, can I get some Wendy's? Sure, honey, whatever you'd like. She was there for me when no one else was. My mom was there for me. I don't mean to word that the wrong way. I love my mom, and it wasn't until I was older till I understood. But during that period, I hated her. I absolutely had the most hatred for her. And I just felt betrayed by both my parents. And I felt like the only person I could ever trust or talk to was my grandma. She was the one responsible, picking me up from school and hanging out with me. And to this day, I've always looked up to her. I think a lot of the decisions I've made in my life were because I wanted to be as far away from the decisions my mom and dad made as a kid. They did drugs, they smoked, they drank. My dad cheating on women. I just wanted to not be them. I did one of those decisions, which is why today I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't do drugs, I didn't sleep around. I saved myself for the person that I loved, and that's what I did. And I'm glad I stuck to my code, my morals. I didn't have religion to guide me. I never had the talk. Hey, son, don't smoke. I never had the talk, hey, don't sleep around, wrap yourself. I never had any of that. I guess they just trusted me enough to know that I despised some of the decisions they made, so they knew. So that's basically, I guess, that part. We're going to talk a little bit more about middle school, what goes on during that, video games, how they impacted me, and, a little bit more about that in the next episode. So I want to thank you guys for all the support and everything that you have done so far. Like I said, at this point, I didn't spend any time at my father's. He just kind of was there. And that's pretty much all that really happened. So again, guys, thanks for watching. Hopefully you guys can continue to watch these and you guys like these up. Like I said, this wasn't as sad as the other one, but I wanted to give you guys a little bit of an understanding of my family before we get into some more of this stuff. That the moment with Terry in my life was probably the most difficult that I've ever dealt with. It was invasion. It was... I can't describe it. I mean, I wish I could. The part where me and my mom, these were the years of my life where me and my mom just could no longer see eye to eye, and I took everything out on her, even though she still tried. She didn't give up on me, but I gave up on her, and which is not good. That's weak of me. I regret that. And this is kind of what happened. So we're going to talk a little bit more about middle school, sports, intelligence, and all that good stuff in the next one, guys. Thanks for watching. Remember to leave a rating. Let me know if there's anything else you want me to talk about. Peace out. Get it?